Meeting to order at clock on 3 o'clock, right on 3 o'clock?
3:03.
3:03. All members present, Bill, Charles, Craig, myself, Craig, and Mike and Patrick. Let's see, what do we have here? Approved consent agenda. Anybody have any questions on the minutes from the last meeting or the current payments?
No questions on the minutes, but as always, I'm curious about some of the entries on the payment schedule. And I think I asked this before, who's Stuart C. Irby? Who's that?
They are a supplier for just electric department products.
Oh, okay. And then, what's the Water Conservation Service? We paid them some chunk of money.
Probably leak detection. But
For the city streets, waters?
Yeah?
do you remember where you saw it?
I'm looking here. Page 2 of the second,
Second set?
yeah, second set. Second,
Yeah.
first one on the top.
I mean, and again, I'm not questioning that there was justification to pay or anything like that. It's just, it's like,
Yeah.
what would the Water Conservation Service be doing?
Okay.
Or who are they? Or
Yeah, that's what I think that is, leak detection.
yeah. And then there's a couple entries where it'll say like Jeff Eliason. Does that mean like he's getting reimbursed? Is that how
Yeah,
how
that's
that
right.
works? Yeah.
A lot of times that'll be for travel reimbursement for trainings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Neil Hansen I saw is on there once or
Yep.
twice.
Water Conservation Services, Inc. is a company that provides underground water leak detection,
That's what
according to Google.
I called it.
There was a lot of water leaking here yesterday.
Yeah.
Thankfully not here.
No, not in the roof, yeah, no,
Yeah,
outside
nothing's
though, my
flooded
gosh, I don't know what we get.
downtown.
3 inches of rain in a half hour?
Pretty close, and this morning we came and the parking lot was already dried out. So
Yeah.
yesterday at the park board meeting, it was
No, we
up
didn't
over
have,
the curb line.
Right.
And then cleaned up really fast.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Also move.
Second.
Second?
Okay, motion passes. Let's see, item on discussion today is utility connection fees. Mike, do you want to
Sure.
jump in on that? I guess it's just,
That's kind of a broad topic.
yeah, talk about sewer and electric.
Mostly sewer and water is what we're going to talk about today,
Okay.
but just in general, our utility fees are designed to pay for the cost of adding a new customer. That includes the necessary equipment and then the staff time. What it doesn't include is the actual installation of a new service. So if somebody comes and wants to build a new house, for instance, and there's not an existing service line for water or sewer, then they'll have to hire a contractor to do that. They'll still have to pay us a utility fee, and a portion of that fee covers the water meter and the curb stop valve, and then just the time to supervise, to make sure the connection is done appropriately, the time to add them to our utility billing system as a customer. There's also another fee, however, that we call a facility fee. A lot of places have a different name for a fee like this. They'll call it a sewer access or a water access charge. So if you've heard of SAC and WAC fees, yeah, you gotta have a good acronym if you're in the government, right?
Those are good ones.
Those are great ones. Yeah, they're fun to say. You have no idea what they mean. They're the perfect type of acronym.
I don't know, they sort of describe the,
Yeah, the feeling you get when you have to pay them. Exactly. That's right. We don't charge those fees in the high amount because there are some cities that speculate on expanding services and then try to collect their money back with these access charges. And that's not something that makes any financial sense to us or really any city in the past 50 years. But But what we do charge those fees for is some kind of mix of, we need new customers to help reimburse existing customers for the money that they've invested in the system that's serving that person. We also need new customers to pay their share of the expansion of the system costs, not another block of pipe, but a bigger water tank and more capacity at the treatment plant, or things like that, which are, things that don't come about because of 1 or 10 or even 50 new customers, but eventually they do come about. So the idea behind these facility fees was to collect those monies, not necessarily set them aside, but just as a symbolic way for people that are putting additional stresses on the system to compensate the system for that. What that means is, what we charge is $1,000 connection for water and for sanitary, and then per unit. So again, a single family home is going to pay $1,000 facility fee for a water connection, $1,000 facility fee for a sewer connection, $300 each for hookup fees, and then usually $100 for electric and $75 for a filing fee to record their utility connection easements at the courthouse. And what we have is a new house costing $2,775 in utility fees. You think about the cost of constructing a new house, and this is not a large amount. This is probably less than 1% of new construction costs these days. But it's still something. It's a noticeable amount of money. What do we do, though, with this $2,000 we collect?
So I'm not quite following the arithmetic, sorry. So the 2775, that includes the connection fee
It
and the
connection
facility
fees,
fee?
facility fees, and not all those fees are listed in the memo because they include fees I don't really want to consider changing today.
Okay,
The facility fees are the biggest part of it at $2,000.
okay.
So if we were going to add, say, another 100 homes to the 700 we've got in town right now, we probably still don't need to increase the size of our water or wastewater treatment plants. We might need to start thinking about additional storage. But at 100 new homes, that's $200,000 of fees. That doesn't really pay for anything when it comes to the expansion of a treatment plant.
And it sounds like it's not even earmarked, right? It just goes into the
And it's
general
not
fund.
earmarked.
Yeah.
So it does, it goes into the balances that all these funds have that we use to make capital improvements as time goes on. So in a sense, it doesn't have to be earmarked. It just
Yeah,
gets
I
spent
see.
on system improvements. But if we were going to try and account for, well, what is the impact that this growth is having? 100 new homes out of 700 is 10 to 15% of the reason what that new system's going to serve, and $100,000 or $200,000 at 10 to 15% of a project. Yes, some project maybe, but not really any one of significance, where it's probably more likely going to be 5 or 10 or 15 million to do a project like that. So these fees aren't really adequate to cover the spirit of what they're designed to do. And one way we could go with that is to try and figure out, well, how much should we collect so that they are adequate? Another way we could go with that is to say, is there even any reason to do that in the first place? When we do make a system improvement, we will borrow money for it, and there'll be a combination of previous ratepayers' money and future ratepayers' money that'll be used to pay for that improvement. We'll have some cash on hand that previous ratepayers contributed, and we'll have some debt that future ratepayers will have to cover. So I don't know that it makes it easier or it's even explainable to try and tell people how the facility fees play into that mix. One of the topics recently where this has come up is in the city's focus on housing and an attempt to see more housing units built. Usually when people talk about utilities costs for housing, they're talking about the real cost, which is the installation of more water and sewer mains. That's the real utility cost for new housing, and that's not something that we can really make go away. We can subsidize or find somebody else's money, but we can't make it cost less. But this facility fee is arbitrary, and we can talk about it. It's ours and ours alone, and it's trying to represent something, but it's not something that we can say this is for sure what it's being spent on. So what is it?
So just just a question for clarification. You said that the adding, whatever 500 feet of sewer pipe or water pipe in the street, that's an expense, and you say you can't make that go away. That is,
Yeah.
it's going to have to get done. Somebody's going to have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, like for example, the big new apartment building up on the hill that's planned, right, up at the top of Fifth Street,
Yeah.
or Fifth Avenue. That will require new water lines going up there, I'm assuming?
It will not.
Or really, there's already lines up there?
Yeah.
Okay, well, different, I don't know what another example would be, is somebody's gonna build a house in a place where there aren't really water lines. Well, actually, I know a place myself where we were talking about doing that, and it would have required, 100 feet maybe of sewer line and water line. You're saying that cost doesn't go away, and you're also saying that currently, anyway, the city doesn't pay for that. It's whoever wants to build their house is gonna be responsible.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I see. So you're saying that's a cost of somebody building a house. That cost is not going to go away. They're still going to have to pay for that, but you could.
Well, somebody will, right? You can't disappear it.
Right. And
Somebody's paying the contractor, somebody's buying the pipe.
Well, how do you handle that now?
We handle that by the costs for extensions are 100% towards the benefited properties.
Yeah.
And actually, the math on that is working now, that it's worth the money to extend lines because there's an opportunity to improve properties at a higher rate. We only require 5,000 square foot lots, or there's multifamily opportunities. That's not really the issue I'm trying to get to today.
Right. I just want to make sure I'm clear in my mind what
Yeah.
we're talking about here.
Yeah, because that one's is a bigger one, but it's also there's not options really to make that easier for folks other than to find someone else's money to spend on it.
Yeah.
In this case, we're charging that fee, and we're trying to say that that new customer represents an expense that we don't want the other customers to have to just pay.
Well, there is a real expense, right, for, as is written in your little intro. No, there's staff creating a new account. I mean, there is administrative expense. There is cost to actually go up and mount a meter and
Yes.
all the rest of it. That's valid.
And probably we need to adjust those as well, although the water and sewer connection fees at $300 each are adequate, I'd say.
Yeah.
The electric one's not quite adequate, but again, a problem for a different day. The connection fees I wouldn't recommend changing, and I think our philosophy about it is, and our rules about the connection fees,
You call that's the same as hookup fee?
yeah,
Yeah.
the hookup fee
Okay.
is that the cost of hooking up is entirely the cost of the benefited property.
Yes.
And if they need to spend $15,000 digging across the street to put in a water and a sewer connection and then repaving the street and rebuilding the curb, that's entirely up to them to do that. And if we need to be involved in some way that costs us more than the $300 that we're charging them, they're gonna pay for that. So for the electric side, that's a little clearer, where we don't have the electric service available right where the person is, and we need to extend our mains a length of, whatever. We'll send them an estimate and say, this is what it costs us to actually do that, and charge them for it. With water and sewer, we don't do the extensions. It just costs a lot more and isn't feasible to do in short lengths. You really need to do big chunks at a time to make it economical, but for those service lines, that's there. As our expenses go up, we'll adjust those connections. The facility fees, though, I can't show somebody a list of, here's what we collect this to spend on. It's more about that idea of it.
That's almost like, it's like a membership fee in a way, like
little bit.
if you would join a country club or something, you know, like, yeah, there's a $10,000 joining fee, and then you pay a rent.
So when
whatever.
we're thinking about a system where we need to defend it from growth or fund growth with growth, that type of a fee makes sense.
Mhm.
When we have a system like ours where we have excess capacity, it actually is better for the existing customers for us to add new customers so that we can share those fixed costs over a greater area.
So again, help me to understand. Let's take the, what's it called? Switchback?
Yes.
Switchback Apartments? Switchback Lane? No, I can't remember.
I believe Village. is what they're
Switchback
calling it.
Village, okay.
Yes.
51 new apartments. So would that be 2,775 times 51?
Well,
For them?
if they only have one actual physical water connection,
Okay.
we'll charge them $300 for that one service line and one
Okay.
water meter.
Yeah,
And $300 for one sewer connection.
which is, I'm assuming is what they'll have.
The facility fee, however, isn't based on number of connections, it's based on number of units.
So the facility
So
fee
we
would
would
be.
charge them $2,000 per unit for a facility fee.
So that's pretty,
It's $100
That's
grand.
significant, yeah.
Yeah. Now, again, in the total amount that I'm sure their budget is, it's
Except they're.
less than 1%, maybe, but
Yeah,
it's
but
not. it's
Those
still-
1% add up.
It's a real number, like, that's a big number.
Is it legal to base the fee on the project? In other words, could we say, because I'm thinking of Dave Walters, you know, he got the little yellow house from North House and moved it up.
Yeah,
It's a passion project, he's not planning to make money, he wants to rent it to a local family, you know, he's not even planning to live in it, he's gonna make it a rental property, it's all, you know, something we really want to encourage.
Yeah.
And for him, $2,000 is significant, I mean, that's gonna basically be a loss probably for him.
yeah.
And and correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't really followed it this closely, but didn't the zoning or the ordinance change a little bit in Grand Marais to allow for sort of additional dwellings, mother-in-law type of dwellings? And
Yeah.
so presumably we'll see some of those, and those will be small scale. So what I'm getting at is, could we waive the fee below a certain cost of building, and then, but if somebody comes in and builds a $500,000 house in Grand Marais, then, yeah, okay, you guys, it's not a significant part of the, you know, part of the,
I mean, I think you can come up with some standards where you're
Kind of a sliding-
discounting certain things that you're trying to incentivize.
yeah, so
I
we
wouldn't
would-
recommend it. So let's just talk about Dave's project, for instance. His motives are well-meaning, it meets the needs that we have right now, and yet he, for who knows what reason, in 6 months may have to sell the property.
Mhm.
And he could sell it to somebody who lives in Florida who's using it as a second home, and it no longer meets any of the requirements we have. So, did it
Yeah.
work? Maybe, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't an actual barrier to him to do that project. Anyway, so
Yeah, I mean,
it's tough to pick and choose.
could have been though. I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
Well, you know, what I would like to incentivize, I'll just talk about what I would like, is, you know, housing for people who are working in Grand Marais, as opposed to second homes and vacation homes and
Yeah.
and Airbnbs. And so that's kind of what I'm driving at, is if we could come up with a schedule that would sort of incentivize that type of, and I know there's no way to guarantee that those would last that way, but,
When new construction may not be what those people end up living in either. You
Yeah.
know, it's such a complex market that adding 20 new high-end homes might actually free up housing for working
yeah. it might.
families in a different place. Or it might not. You just,
Yeah.
you can't really say. I think that through these fees, what I'm trying to say is, this clearly doesn't incentivize anything that we want. And I don't think it meets the purpose of why we established them in the first place. It's kind of missing in the middle on both ends.
So why we established it in the first place is to somehow build, I don't know, the reserve funds, but as you say, it's not being used for that, but that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
Reserve funds for necessary expansions as a result of these incremental additions to the
Yeah.
housing stock.
This actually makes sense in a town that is growing. And so where these come from are suburbs, right? Where they actually fund most of their system improvements on growth. And a noticeable percentage of housing is new every year. That's just not our case at all. I don't think it ever has been, at least not in the past 80 years.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense for us to use growth as a tool to fund our system improvements.
Because we don't have that much
Because
growth.
there isn't any growth, yeah. And, you know, our budget, we budget for this amount every year. It's in the numbers you're gonna see in a month that we plan on collecting $10,000 in connection fees.
Well, I
5
need-
new houses.
It's not really enough, right, to make a big difference in the rates you're gonna collect. And then you get a 50-unit apartment building, and it's an incredible percentage difference in what you would collect. But you're not actually gonna take that 100,000 and do any system improvements with it. If there are system improvements that are gonna be required by this project, that it's the project that's gonna have to fund it. So we don't need this fee to do that mechanism.
How do you mean that? The project's gonna have to fund that? Like, somebody built 100,000, or no, 500 person, or 500 unit apartment building.
Yeah.
So you're saying we would say, oh, now we're definitely gonna need a expansion of our water treatment plant. You're gonna have to pay for that? Is that what you mean?
Not exactly, but I think you've taken that to the logical extreme of what I'm trying to say, so it suits the purpose. Yeah, that there isn't ever going to be a project that's that clear cut, like, okay, that's the reason why we have to increase the size of the plant. We're just not going to have a project that big. Even this 50 unit, which is a massive project, that's the biggest, housing project
Ever.
we've had ever probably in this
Mhm.
town. Yeah, and it doesn't move the needle. We don't need more storage, we don't need more treatment, we don't need more sewer collection. We've got stuff in place to do it, but what about if the pressure isn't what they want it to be up there because it's at the top of our system? That's a problem that, we'll cooperate with them to help figure out and deal with, but it's not something we're gonna ask other customers to pay for.
Yeah. This would be a good time for me to disclose that I'm now on the Housing Redevelopment Authority Board. So that's
Yeah,
something I need to disclose and put on the record. I
that's
don't-
good news.
I don't think it disqualifies me from this discussion, but it obviously bears on the work of the HRA.
It informs.
And I can tell you, even though you say, well, it's, less than 1% of a project, these projects that the HRA is promoting for workforce housing in Grand Marais and in the rest of the county are really, really close to the bone on the budget. I mean, every dollar counts. And without some kind of subsidy or some way to reduce the cost, these projects won't happen. So if we could remove this facility fee for workforce housing in Grand Marais, which may mean removing it for everybody,
Yeah.
I would support that.
To me, if you think the purpose of the facility fee makes sense, then we need to decide how to charge the type of projects we want, what we want to charge them. If you're not sure it makes sense, then there's an easy answer, right? Let's just get rid of it.
Well, and I'm aware-
If we think it's actually a barrier to housing construction, and that's what you're proposing right now, is that even in a big
It is a
project,
barrier.
it's a barrier.
Yeah.
We have the power to do something about that.
I mean, it's a barrier in some cases, but, for the person who walks up here and says, well, I'm gonna build my dream house on the shore of Lake
Right.
Superior, and I'm spending
Well,
$1
that's what I was
million on
getting
that.
at.
Yeah.
I'm
That's-
aware that
They don't care.
in a lot of cities, especially cities that are in tourism areas that suffer from the same syndrome that we suffer from, the Aspen syndrome, if you will, that they actually do have systems where more expensive homes pay fees that subsidize the entry for less expensive homes, just on the principle that those less expensive homes are more likely to go to workers.
The mechanism that used to be is that permit fees were based on the value of construction. And then you're collecting more fees from people that have more means. Well, it turns out that people that have more means also have more lawyers. And these systems have all been challenged in the state of Minnesota too. And they're not legal. New statutes have been passed, not new anymore, they're decades old, that
Okay.
say that what you collect in fees, you have to be able to account for in your actual costs associated with whatever that fee is being charged for. So
That was
what
my-
are our actual costs in this?
That was my original question, is that legal to do?
It's not based on value, no.
Yeah.
But the other way to do that is to collect the same rate of fee from everyone. And one of the things that we're using that for is to write down the cost of a project that we deem necessary. I actually wouldn't charge that in the hookup fees. I'd probably just put that in your general rates. It's not a simple thing for the utilities to regulate in the morality realm like that, because we're accounting for a particular service that we're selling, and it doesn't correlate with the value of the property the way that property tax does, for instance. It correlates with usage, and so if that house doesn't put a big strain on our system, then it's harder for us to justify charging a big price to that person. Now, typically, usage and square footage do correlate pretty well, particularly in the electric side of things. So
Yeah.
it still works out okay. But if we're thinking about removing barriers to housing construction, the first thing I would say is we don't need these fees at all, that we should just get rid of them.
You're talking about the facility
The
fee.
facility fees, not the hookup or the connection fees. But then the second thing I would say is, do we want to be investing in, as a utility commission, a certain type of housing project? And I don't know if you're even able to, honestly.
What do you mean investing in?
Like, do you want to take some of your ratepayer funds and subsidize the cost
Oh.
of connecting particular types of housing? Which is really the same question, I think, that you're asking,
Yeah.
just a slightly different method of accounting to get there.
Sure.
And I don't know whether you can. I know that the HRA can, I know that the city can, although the city's given the HRA its housing authorities, but I don't know if the Utilities Commission has the legal authority to do that. But what we do have the legal authority to do is control the fees we're charging, and here's an opportunity staring you in the face.
Yeah?
You're saying that adding that 50-unit apartment isn't going to require changes to the water treatment plant or wastewater treatment plant. But it is using up some of the excess capacity.
Yep.
So it's not nothing, and I think it's and every new place, home, apartment, whatever it would be, is also going to be using up some of the excess capacity that's in the system right now. So it seems like it's fair to account for that somehow.
Well, that's back to my first question. Does the story that we're telling about what this fee pays for make any sense at all?
Given the way we handle it.
I mean, even given the way we handle it, it does, because of the reasoning that you're describing. Who's paying for that excess capacity right now? All the existing customers. That's who's paying for it.
Right.
Because we have to maintain a water treatment and a wastewater treatment facility that's bigger than we need. And so our rates are a little bit higher than they need to be because of that. If we collect this facility fee at $10,000 a year, that doesn't actually change the rates that we're collecting. At $100,000 a year, if we were going to get a new 50-unit apartment every year, well, then it would make a significant difference in the rates that we would be collecting. But it would also move us towards the need to do system expansions that would end up costing more rates to everyone anyway. So I have a hard time following the logic of the facility fee to where it actually does benefit the folks that are paying for the extra excess capacity today without it being significantly higher.
Right, right. It's tricky.
Well, it sounds like you're thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we eliminate the facility fee and keep the connection fees.
I think
Is that-
that
is
eliminating the facility fee could reduce a barrier to new housing construction. I think it supports the city's priorities. And I think that the benefits that are created by that far outweigh any potential costs associated with losing the collection of the fee.
I agree, and I would like to have, and I don't know, can we direct you to do stuff as a board?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I would be interested in having you do some research on ways that the Public Utilities Commission can support the work of the HRA in Grand Marais financially. Maybe there aren't any ways, but I think we should look into it at least, because I know that it's the difference between go and no-go on a project. It's a fine line on this housing that's designed for the workers. And this isn't low income, this isn't subsidized housing as such, it's just a way to get the project built, and in order to do that, there has to be some sort of a cost reduction, or they don't fly, they don't go. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it, right? I mean, there would be no problem.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I do have to say, it's frustrating to me personally, I'm just speaking for myself now, that we have to attack this angle from the cost side. I think it would make more sense if people could just afford housing, then there wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, if it was affordable because we all earned enough money to afford it.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. So, but, we do live in the real world. I recognize that, so I think it is legitimate to try to attack the cost side as a public good. That's a legitimate role that's basically the reason the HRA exists, and it's a legitimate role for the county and city to try to participate in if possible and support.
So if you say we're going to eliminate this either for everyone or for these sort of, I don't know, HRA promoted, anyway, like low-income housing, for example, or housing that's designed for people, to make it more affordable for people, I
It's
guess.
designed for people like deputy sheriffs, teachers, nurses,
Yeah.
people that,
Right.
working professionals.
Yeah, no. And
Usually
it's-
two incomes.
And I'm not being critical of the idea, I support it, but if you say, well, we're going to eliminate that for this sort of housing stock, and then maybe we are or are not going to eliminate for this other sort of housing stock, okay, fine. So what have we lost as a result of that? We lost, some tens of thousands maybe of revenue in the course of a year in a 50-person or 50-unit apartment building, 100,000. So we've lost basically city revenue for ongoing activities. It seems like we don't have any provision for, and we don't even now, but we have no provision for periodic upgrades and maintenance of the upgrades and maintenance or expansion of the system, which, that's going to be required at some point.
We do have that.
I think I'd say we do.
It's user fees.
And so let's go at this a slightly different direction. If we recognize that there's a loss of revenue source here, there isn't a corresponding loss of expense, right? As a matter of fact, there might be more expenses with more homes connected to our system.
There will be.
So how do we intend to fund that? We're losing this revenue source.
Right.
It'll be through rates.
Rates, yeah.
So with a 50-unit apartment building, they're going to be paying a pretty hefty utility bill just to pay for the water, sewer, and electric that they're using. And I think that we'll be able to use the additional rate payers paying similar rates that we have today to make up for that difference rather than the one-time fee up front. So the risk is, like, there is an effect, right? And you can tell the story with the project being big enough that it's clear that there's an effect, right?
Right.
500 new homes just got added. We need to double the size of our water treatment plant. And should everybody have to pay that debt? Well, I think I would say the answer to that is it's not a bad idea to have everybody pay that debt because we've got a lot more people to split it amongst. So all the existing fixed costs are going to get split amongst those new people, and all that debt's going to get split too. And I don't know that it actually is a negative to us.
Well, it also contributes to a functioning society
Yeah.
in the city, which is important.
Well, I personally don't think it's ever smart for a city to fund its operations planning on growth. I mean, it's one thing to look and say we want to grow in certain areas, but the idea that Grand Marais is based on growth, clearly there's not numbers to back that up. Do we want it to be 3 to 5 times the size it is now? Everybody's going to have a different opinion on that. It's not really relevant to our decision-making here. We know how to deal with it. We know how we're going to fund it. I don't think this facility fee helps us with that enough that you should continue to use it.
Are you looking for a motion today, or do we cogitate on this for a while? And
That's up to you. I think if it's clear what you want to do, feel free and go ahead and do it. If you want to spend some time or you have other questions or you want to go through some other scenarios to think it through.
I guess I would propose that we table this till the next meeting, because I would like to do some research on this and just see what other, what, if there's any way we can concoct a system that incentivizes a little more than just dropping the fee for everyone. But
Yeah.
maybe there isn't. I'm not saying there is. I just I don't feel prepared to act today without doing a little more research. But it's
Yeah, I would agree.
it's up
I
to
mean,
you guys.
I feel like
So hookup
I haven't
fees-
thought about this enough. Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah, hookup fees make
So-
sense. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because there's hard costs involved in hooking up water, sewer, electric.
Right.
And we should recoup our costs on that, and we shouldn't make other users pay for that, I don't think, personally. And I don't think a hookup fee of 300 or 400 or whatever it is, even 500 at some point in time, is really gonna stop somebody from building, whether it's a rental or a low income, or whether it's their brand new house they're gonna build. So, I mean,
I agree.
I don't think that's a big issue, but the $1,000 or the $2,000 hookup fee, I mean, you've heard people complain about it, we've all heard people complain about it. What are you doing with that money? What do we pay that for? That's the question that people ask.
Yeah.
So I guess
So,
that's a way to think about it, I guess.
Yeah.
Is-
Well, I mean, long-term, what I'd like to see, and I think this is sort of the stated goal of the HRA, is to have a system in place that makes it possible for people with working incomes to come to Grand Marais and build a home or buy a home and make a life here. I mean, that's kind of what and in order to do that, we're going to have to figure out a way to reduce costs for that type of housing, or it won't happen. At least unless the whole economy changes radically, but
It's
based on the last 50 years'
It's an
experience.
interesting topic because, we're, as a PUC group here, we're thinking about ways to reduce costs of building for somebody. But then if you take the steps to the point where the house is done and finished and living in, who along that way has taken steps to reduce the cost for building? Because I don't know of too much going on in this town other than it is very expensive to build in this town. When you're pushing $300 to $350 a square foot to build a house.
Well, in the case.
And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not for or against, I want to think about this facility fee. I do think that if we can't justify what we're doing with it and why we're doing it, then I think we should probably take a look at getting rid of it. But I also don't think that, it adds to the cost. I do get that. But there's so many things now going on with building and labor and concrete and dirt and excavation and building materials. Costs are just over the top for a lot of people right now. So that kind of is the big thing, I think, why we don't see duplexes getting built and fourplexes getting built and things like that getting
Absolutely.
built in this town, is because you can't correlate enough monthly rent to justify building it. I mean, if we can charge $1,900 a month rent like they do in other parts of Minnesota and bigger cities, then maybe we can, but it gets to be a fine line of what can support that project.
It's a problem, no doubt.
And there's a lot of factors involved in that project other than just hooking up your sewer water.
Here's the one cost of building that people can count on will stay fixed and is not subject to Canadian supply of lumber or anything else.
Right.
So that's a
Right.
beautiful thing about this.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
Well, then, if you move outside of a city where you don't have utilities, you have to put in a septic system. Well, we all know what happened to the cost of those in the last
Or a well.
just 3 years, and a well. So, you start looking at those costs.
But the reality is
You know.
the bulk of the housing that'll be built for middle-income people in Cook County in the next 5 years will be subsidized, or it won't happen.
Well, that's just it. It
That's
won't
the
happen.
reality.
I mean,
No,
if it's not subsidized.
That's why we have the HRA, is to
Right.
figure out those subsidies. So it's IRRR, infrastructure grants, it's, they're scrambling for money all over the place to try to put those deals together. And it's surprising how just a little bit of difference in cost will make the difference to getting a developer to actually build something.
Right.
So I think I'm supporting this. I'm glad you brought this up, because even though it doesn't seem like much money, it adds up with everything else. So anything we can do to support that effort, I think we should do. But I would like to think about it.
So-
And then we do, like you say, if it's $100,000 on this 50-unit project, on the flip side of that, we can look at that, okay, a 30-year building, I don't know, 40-year, whatever. We can look at the longevity of the usage rates and what our profits are on those usage rates and what we make off a facility like that goes back into the water and the sewer and the plant. Everybody who pays a bill is reinvesting in the system. That's how it works, so.
Yeah.
If you knew that over the course of the next 10 years, Grand Marais is going to double in size, like there's 700 homes, you say there's going to be 1,400.
Is there room even?
Well, there's not.
No.
But anyway, suppose, infill, I don't know, everybody's going to have
Hasn't
a,
happened in 400 years.
but
There's room.
suppose,
Ask Cal Greenwood. 60% of the city is publicly owned right now. 90% of the
Oh,
county.
yeah, well,
so if that were the case, now we are going to talk about expansion of the wastewater treatment plant and probably the water plant and the water tanks and supply systems, or piping systems. So if you knew that was going to happen, what would we need to do in terms of preparing for it with respect to revenue, and how would we manage that? So I'm trying to get to the question of, is this fee or some other kind of mechanism, does it actually, does it bias anything? And if, or do we need to be thinking about having some sort of fee that would bias something?
Right. So we double in size. 700 new connections come in, and we collect $1.5 million in fees from them. Let's just say that. And we have to increase the size of our wastewater treatment plant. We've seen the bill for what it's going to take to just bring our wastewater treatment plant up to speed in its existing state. Maybe another 50% on top of that, and we could add some more capacity. That's a $15 million proposition.
Yeah.
So we're 10% of the way on the wastewater treatment plant. Water treatment plant, I would guess, is a similar type of $5 to $10 million cost to make that kind of expansion. So
So this isn't doing it, isn't it? And
it's not
never
going to get
do
us
it.
there.
It's
Yeah.
never gonna.
No.
How would we pay for that? Well, we're going to ask for help, first of all,
Yeah.
to pay for it. And hopefully, one of the reasons why we have this pressure on our housing price is the same reason why we might be able to get help. It's because everybody knows who Grand Marais is and wants to be here. But we're going to pay for it with debt. And the people who are going to pay it back are the people who are going to use it. So there'll be a lot more ratepayers to help cover those costs if we doubled in size. It's so much more complex than that, right? We don't have to allow the system to double in size. We don't have to expand. It's
Meaning you could say, we're going to limit the number of new units that could be constructed in town.
as a matter of fact, that happened here already, and it wasn't us that did it. It was the state, and said, and this happens in small towns where if their capacity at their wastewater treatment plant isn't keeping up, the MPCA can come in and say, you're not allowed to connect anyone else to this until it's fixed. We're not there. We're nowhere near that. And I don't think that with all the great work that we see the HRA going to do for us in 5 to 10 years, we're going to get there. If we do, this is a good news, bad news sort of proposition, and I suspect we'll be so happy with the good news, we'll be able to figure out the difficult side.
Well, in terms of the numbers that came out of the housing studies, if the switchback project is built, which seems pretty certain at this point, I'd say in the high 90s for certainty, and then that, they paved the way in that process for building another unit there, another 51. And then the other smaller projects that are going on, and possibly maybe something in the one roof block that they own, maybe something could happen there. I think there's some interest in the business park, a couple of lots in the business park being converted to housing. If those projects all happened, that would pretty much meet the need for Grand Marais as it has been defined in the latest housing study. I mean, we would kind of be there because the real need is actually in the West End. I mean, that's where the numbers are. So in terms of need, and I think what did they say, 450 units to kind of satisfy the excess demand in the county for workforce housing. If I could be wrong on that figure, but it's in that neighborhood. So if 150 were done here, that would leave the rest of the county to fulfill that. In other words, not everybody's going to live in Grand Marais
Right.
that works in Cook County. So,
But it sounds
and
like,
again, I applaud your bringing this up. I think this is great. I'm leaning very much toward, kind of accepting your recommendation or your idea on this. I just want to do a little more research and then have it up on the agenda next month.
and it sounds like what you're saying is that even if you knew for a certainty that the city or the number of housing units in the city were going to double in the next 10 years, you wouldn't worry about that too much. Kind of like, we could manage that, and we don't need to somehow increase fees or revenues.
Oh, no, those are definitely the tools we would use.
Well,
I'm not much of a warrior, so that's not the
only
right question
tools-
to ask.
At that point in time, that'd be the only tools you'd have.
We'd have to figure that out. I think we can figure that
Rebuild your
out
infrastructure.
without the facility fee, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I
Right.
don't think that where it's at right now helps us. And so
Right.
we either have to make it a lot bigger
Right.
or we don't need it.
so is there something you would think about implementing now or in the next year, if you knew that this was going to happen?
Not a new method, no. So the way we budget now, we have a capital improvement plan. We anticipate future expenses. We think about what the debt payments are going to look like. We imagine how many gallons and kilowatts we're going to sell. Like we're already doing that math. So to double the number of units, we're just changing a few parameters in the same formulas, and we'll come up with the answers. So I don't know whether that means we'd have to increase rates or not, but I know how to deal with that. Yeah.
But that would be the mechanism through which you would address that need for expansions. and-
Yes. And we don't do a lot of fancy stuff with our rates right now. You know, we don't have commercial versus residential rates. We don't have industrial users of any kind, really. So, you know, if we need to get fancier with our rate design to try and account for affordability or impact, or, I mean, we can do that. But I don't think that we're really looking at that. This is typically going to be small businesses and residential-based community, and I think the tools we have in place, even without the facility fee, we can handle that.
Mhm. It's good. Okay, well, I still think tabling it makes
If
sense.
we take no action, is it tabled then?
Yeah, we
I
can.
mean, there's, nobody put anything on the table. You ever hear
Nobody,
take it off, or you-
yeah.
Yeah.
There's the last question that I included in the memo. Just imagine for a second you decide you want to keep these facility fees, and we don't need to change them to think about this, but does it make sense to charge a 50-unit apartment building for 50 units of housing or not? And I don't know the answer to this, but I just want to offer you one more tool that we use right now. We charge a different fixed fee for different size meters. So if you have a typical residential connection, you've got a 5/8 inch meter, and we charge a fixed fee of, it's probably about $30 to $35 a month for water and sewer. And if you have a larger meter, then that fee goes up. And, you know, it's not a linear progression either. It goes up faster, kind of a geometric curve at first. I think the idea is that the capacity of the pipe isn't a linear growth rate either. So, but then we get to our top, and we've got 2-inch meters at 140 and 3-inch meters at 240. And they're actually, the ratio is maybe still growing a little bit, and that's the biggest meter that we currently have right now is a 3-inch meter. So we, instead of a straight linear per unit, we could also think about using the meter size as one of the ways to calculate this fee. The effect of that would be that smaller projects would pay a higher percentage than larger projects. So I don't know how, whether that makes sense to me in this setting, but it's another thing to think about if you decide you do want to keep these fees. It doesn't make sense to me to charge them an unlimited amount, because what we really want is more units, and 50 at a time is a great benefit to us, and it actually is only one hookup that we have to make, so it's really efficient. Something to put in the thought process for the next month.
Great. Thank you for
I don't
bringing
know.
this up.
So we don't need to have any more.
No, so you wanna, on the agenda for next month, we will circle back to this facility fee, and then we'll decide what we wanna do with it.
So
Okay.
I can make an attempt to do the analysis on what you're talking about. 500 new units show up. We've got some imaginary number of expenses that
Right.
correlates with that. We can put a decent estimate together. And then, like, what percentage of that do we want paid up front by these new customers as fees? And, you know, you
It
just
just
plug in
seems-
some percentages and see what it looks like.
Right.
And where would this fee make sense in terms of a percentage, and then what would that actually look like per unit?
Yeah.
So when you do a 52-unit building like that, it's gonna obviously be sprinklered, I would
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah.
So you can do that on a 3-inch water line?
Nope.
No.
No, they'll bring in a 6-inch service,
Yeah.
but they won't, their water, like the domestic usage, doesn't have to come off that
Right.
directly.
But they need that volume in case they have to tap into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And luckily the tank's right there,
Right.
but I wonder how long it takes a 6-inch line to drain a 200,000 gallon tank.
it probably goes pretty fast.
You can do the math on that, yeah.
Okay.
Just as long as we're kind of in the neighborhood, what is the status of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades?
That, we asked for money from the federal government by asking to be placed on the appropriations bills. And we're not placed on the appropriations bills. So, we're also in the process of making applications to the state through their existing funding mechanisms for improvements to wastewater treatment plants, and that, the timeline's just longer, so. Stay tuned.
Yep.
I would say very likely in the next 3 or 4 months, we're gonna be having the same conversation we were having in January, which is, what are we gonna plan to do this summer?
So, pretty much on a hold at this point, right? Nothing's happening?
The big project, like, there's no timeline, and I don't think that I would recommend us moving forward in doing it without getting some assistance.
Yeah.
So I think what the plan is we gotta keep working on that piece of it.
Yeah.
And that might take a few iterations before we get a yes. The other piece of it, though, is the odor control stuff. Now, Craig pointed out at the last council meeting, that has not been an issue yet this summer. And we didn't make the improvements that we talked about making.
Why hasn't that been an issue this summer?
So let's have that on an agenda in the future before we have to decide about doing projects next summer.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that.
Just the winds have been favorable?
No,
No,
we've got to,
tweaked a few things.
yeah,
Neil's doing
we've
something.
changed some of the ways it's operating. And Neil will come to a meeting and he can talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should fire that consultant. Man, look at all the
I was keeping,
expensive stuff, and
Neil
Neil
on the
just,
download till I
Neil
saw
just
his
goes
face
and
again.
adjusts a couple of valves and we get the thing solved.
I mean,
Also, I remind you, when I came on the board, and I think Charles expressed the same thing, I'd really like to get a tour. And the response was, wait till summer, but now summer's almost over,
Yeah,
so.
we did the water, we could do that, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to have a tour of the water, well,
Of the sewer?
everything, water,
Yeah.
electric,
well,
and.
let's put it on the agenda for when Neil is here to talk
Okay.
about
Yeah.
our operations change.
Before
We'll
next-
also pop over there.
And we have to do it one at a time, right?
No, we can do it at the meeting. We'll just take the meeting
Oh,
and pick it up.
just
Oh,
take off and
okay.
go
Yeah,
from
that'd
there.
be fun, yeah.
So he's gonna be here next month, Neil is?
I don't know if it'll be next month. It'll be in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, we'll talk about what we changed. And what I mentioned, though, at the council meeting is, we're not counting on that just always working. We think
No.
we know why it helped.
Yeah.
That's different than we're confident that it's always gonna
It's a
be
permanent
anyway.
fix,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Something favorable happened and that's good
Yeah,
for now.
yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
I completely
I'll be
missed it
interested
last
to
summer,
hear.
and I ride my bike right past there every day, and 4 times a day, and
Yeah.
at least 4 times a day. I never smelled it.
Maybe your nose is
Well,
going
it
out.
wasn't
No,
it
I know.
wasn't all the time, but we did have
It
some,
was pretty powerful.
we did have some moments
Yeah.
where it was very powerful
Yeah.
to the point where people staying in hotels, guests were
Complained, yeah.
complaining,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm
Now
not
we
doubting
know.
it,
Yeah.
I'm surprised that I missed it.
But this summer we
I probably
didn't
could smell it
have
from my
that.
house, too, it's not that far away.
think
No,
it's
I don't
good.
doubt that it happened.
Anything else? Okay. Need a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And seconded?
Okay. Motion's been made to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.